Well,
Mo-
Jonathan,
Most,
I have two
most,
reflections, if you don't mind.
uh,
Uh, Number one, we talked about marketplace, and put a comment in to the chat saying that you're talking about market makers, and this is a kind of an economics concept. It's very significant in economics, and it certainly is present in the world of tech and free software and so on. So that's part of the picture. In the world of free or open source software, the market looks quite a bit different from the transactional market that's based on valuation, like in dollars. Um, we've we've come a long way along a path that doesn't involve exchanging value for macros, but here we are. So that's one aspect of the picture. And the other has to do with this that I just put into the chat. Leslie Lamport's Tug Santa Barbara talk. I believe it was 1994. I may be wrong. Uh, but at the Santa Barbara conference, someone got Leslie Lamport to drive down from the Bay Area and give a talk entitled The Future of LaTeX. And the sorts of thoughts he expressed in that talk really stuck with me. He talked about a user interface. And in that year, 1994, Mac OS, with its recent foray into the world of Next Step, was quite new. But the notion of having a user interface that hid the scripting layer, like raw text source, from the user, that was something that he lifted up very strongly. And he talked about the notion of seeing the formatted document and revising, editing that formatted document by typing directly into that view of the document. In other words, the preview, which we now see as like a PDF preview, it's in itself an affordance. So you just stick the insertion point inside and begin inserting characters, words, who knows what else. He also talked about the notion that you could take a, a, a packaged portion of that document and sort of open a door into it and see the LaTeX source, and maybe it's a math expression or something like that, and then you would revise that, and then you would flip it back and you'd see the visual representation. And the notion in his mind is that it would be sort of encapsulated. Anything that you did wrong inside there would be restricted to that one document portion. And furthermore, you would have full access to all of the power of tech and LaTeX, but that, and that was perhaps of necessity for some reason, but then you could return to a sort of a printed view, a representation of the document. And his thinking clearly had advanced, from 1989, when he essentially said, "I'm taking my hands off of LaTeX," to thinking about it in a more creative way. And his thoughts turned to user interface and how the document creator and maintainer would work with the document. And the parts of his vision that are meritorious deserve to be looked into more deeply. I'll just put it that way.
written a quick note about that.
I have a meeting with some students. So
well, thank you for staying for so long, Dwight. I've made a note here. Dual view editing of document fragments, e.g. paragraph or title. I think that's what Lamport, one of the things Lamport was talking about. So there's this localism, and you have a choice of interacting with, you have a choice of the view on the document that you interact with. You can interact. I mean, in a sense, you'd like to be able to grab hold of a float and move it. At least sometimes. And quite what that means in terms of whatever, I don't know. We know what it is to grab hold of a slider and move it. That means the slider has got an X coordinate, and you change the Y coordinate, and you move the Y coordinate, you're changing the Y coordinate. But quite what it means
Yeah,
to
the slider is an instance of what on Mac OS is called a control. In the user interface language, it's called a control. And in more abstract language, it would be called an affordance.
Yeah.
And I think what Lamport was talking about goes all the way back to the much more abstract notion of affordance, in the sense that when you see the insertion point in the formatted representation of the document, it marks the location of an affordance, such that if you type on the keyboard, at that point you're inserting characters. And we get to do that with the coded view of the document using tools like Emacs and so on. And he was talking about a different approach. And then he elaborated on it in a way in which, for instance, let's suppose you were to move the mouse over a symbol, like say alpha, and you might be able to ask for its contextual menu and find a way to change that alpha to a beta, for instance. So that's by way of saying that there are some things that are kind of units, and in order to change them, they know what they need to hear from you in order to change them. So for instance, if you saw a fraction, you would be able to individually address the numerator and the denominator, say. Or if you saw something with a subscript or a superscript, you'd be able to say, let me edit the sub or superscript. And now I'm just remembering what Richard Kinch did on the Windows platform. You know Richard Kinch? He did this math editor thingy, and it integrated really well with tech. And he even had a commercial product. I think he called it Kinch Tech or something like that. But he tried to make a go of a commercial offering for the Windows platform, and it allowed the visual editing of math. So that's the sort of thing Lamport had in mind. And I'll just point out that when you're working with tables, or what in tech is an H-align, if you got to see an editable view of a math alignment, or no, I'm sorry, an H-align, where you could look at each cell as the way the spreadsheet lets you access it. So you would know right away, am I doing my stuff in a particular column or a particular row? That's a view that could afford a user something quite useful, and one where the coded view of the text file, well, it allows one to make mistakes. Let me just say it that way.
You reminded me, Arthur, of LyX, LyX, and I don't think it's part of TechLive. It's something that's got a close relationship to tech. It's very much tech specific, and one would want it to sort of integrate well with TechLive, and in particular the LaTeX part of TechLive, but also all the other tools and so forth that might be available. Sorry, I'm just seeing if I can.
I put LyX.org into the chat.
Yeah, thanks. I'm just looking for the LyX Git repository if it's got one. Oh, it's got its own. It uses its own Git repository, so it's either a well-organized. Yeah, it uses its own Git repository and it uses track as the issue tracker. So LyX is an example of something which maybe stands outside of TechLive, but should, in some sense, also be inside TechLive, in the sense that we'd like to have it proper visibility and all the benefits of being part of TechLive. So LyX is something to think about in those terms. What you're saying about Lamport makes a lot of sense, that when you've got a fraction, for example, it also fits in with what you're talking about having the braces. If you've got frac 1, 2, then your cursor has only got a number of limited points at which you can go. Whereas if it's frac open curly 1, end curly, open curly 2, end curly, then you have the option of editing the content of the curly braces or deleting the whole content of the curly braces and inserting something else instead, for example. Whereas if you just delete the 2, when there are no braces, you get nonsense. You're sort of not staying within the realm of what's legal if you delete the 2, unless you have the braces. The braces allow you to delete the 2. So you can have curly brace over curly brace. But so yes, when you think about it, there's a set of admissible transformations that you can perform on a LaTeX document, and you can define a set of admissible transformations that allow you to get from any valid LaTeX document to any other valid LaTeX document without leaving the realm of LaTeX documents, which is something that most users would like to stay in. And the ability to interact with the representation, with the typeset representation, I think is something that many people find useful, particularly people who spot an error when they read the typeset version.